Hello friends. Moving on to the next topic, which is on assessment of competencies, which is part of the HRM performance management. Uh, we would like to take you through this session and request you to participate. Uh, as a brief introduction, my name is Paul. I've been a banking professional as well as an HR practitioner for a very long time. I worked in 4 organizations and presently I'm with the Suryodaya Small Finance Bank. The first question which comes up in assessment of competency is, what is competency? So competency is nothing but the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. And that is what we mean by competency. Now, every employee has to ensure that he or she has to remain competent to perform and to have a career growth and progression. Now, what is required to be competent? How do you keep yourself competent? To remain competent, one has to acquire knowledge and also the skills on a continuous basis. And this should happen through a process which is known as LURE, which is nothing but learning, unlearning, and relearning. Now, whatever knowledge or skills that we have acquired already may not help us in the times to come. And if you look at knowledge, knowledge is something like a medicine. Now, you know, any medicine that you have to buy from a chemist, it will have an expiry date. Plus, sometimes the medicine we get may not be what we are supposed to buy because there is an error in looking at it differently. Same thing happens to knowledge. You should have the appropriate knowledge for a particular competency. And not only that, whatever knowledge we have, it should be updated. And this is done through a process in human behavior, which is known as LURE, which is nothing but continuously unlearning what you have learned so that we relearn what is required today. Now, past experience alone does not ensure future success. Something like we look at a mutual fund investment, which says that as a rider, it says that the past performance of the fund will not guarantee the same kind of performance because it is all determined by market conditions. Similarly, when you look at past performance, that alone is not an indicator of a future success, though it might help you in terms of gaining experience. But building competencies can facilitate superior performance, and building of the competency can happen only through learning, unlearning, and relearning. Similarly, as we face new challenges at work, we have to develop new skills. And then we should be able to use those newer skills blended with the newly acquired knowledge, the updated knowledge, and through a blended kind of application, we will be able to perform better. And that is how we can continuously improve our performance. But in any case, to remain competent, performance should improve continuously. Now, when you talk about assessment of competencies, we try to compare and contrast competency versus performance. Now, competency is an underlying characteristic that is related to effective and superior performance in job-related situation. So it is to do with how do you perform effectively and in a superior manner in a job-related situation, and that is what we mean by competency. Again, competency is a blend of knowledge and skills and attitude. If you look at competency, we can look at a triangle in which there are 3 sides where there would be the one side which is known as the knowledge, the other one would be skills, and then attitude. Now, generally we say that this particular triangle should be an equilateral triangle where all the 3 sides should be equal. But as we progress and we go through a change, usually you will find that we are able to improve the knowledge, so that side goes up, and also the skills development do happen, either due to the work situation or as a learning exercise. So that side also will get lengthened. But what is very important is to match the attitude so that the triangle continues to be an equilateral triangle. However, if there is a right blend of knowledge, skills, and attitude, then we say that competency is also developing. Through learning and development, these can be improved to improve the performance in a job. So when it comes to performance on the job, competency is a prerequisite. And it has got three components, which would be the knowledge, the skill, and the attitude. Now, can you measure competency? So competencies can be measured to ascertain the level against well-established standards. So we could set up standards of measuring the competency. Now, competency indicates ability and the willingness to do a job, while performance relates to what is actually done. So there are two things. The first part is the ability and the willingness to do a job. But when it comes to performance, it actually relates to what is actually done and how the performance has happened. Having expected competencies are expected to result in expected performance. So performance is actually the output, the result, and competency is more of what is required to actually perform the job, which will be not only the ability but also the willingness. And that way you can compare competency versus performance. Going forward, there is this important requirement of identifying the types of competencies. There are different types of competencies which we could actually discuss under the following heads. The first one is known as a technical competency. Now, technical competency also would mean the hard skills. It's more of the functional knowledge. And then it could be in the form of processes and procedures to be followed in converting inputs into outputs. So hard skills are processes and procedures to be followed in converting inputs into outputs or the expected performance. So this is known as the technical competency. But in competency, we also need to look at the behavioral competency, which would involve soft skills development. For example, your listening skills, taking initiatives. It should be blended with behavioral competency, which are also known as soft skills, and in which listening skills is a very important requirement. Another important skill or behavioral competency is known as taking initiatives, because unless one takes initiatives, there will be no result orientation. Otherwise, it just becomes beating around the bush. So in any task or job to be completed, we should be able to take that initiative and it should be forthcoming so that there is a result orientation. And when you try to do any job or perform any task, you will obviously come across problems. So we should be able to solve those problems. Now, solving problems can be done either by use of knowledge which you acquired, skills which you built, or it could also be to combine the two and use some creative methods or thinking out of the box without breaching any regulation or law, so that you are able to solve the problem. So problem solving is a skill development which you will have to actually cultivate. And of course, in most of the organizations or most of the kind of work which we do, it is always done as a team. And in a team, the interpersonal relationship you maintain, and also the initiatives which you take as an individual, which we call as leadership skills. So all these things put together would form your behavioral competency. Now, both technical as well as behavioral competencies are required and should be blended and combined to enhance the performance at job, because only having technical competency without the behavioral competency will not help us to perform the job. And also because most of the jobs which we do are collaborative in the sense that as against competition between the members of a team, if there is a collaboration where each one can contribute, or what we talk as a situational leadership ability demonstration. So to perform a particular job, there will be many things to be done. Some of them would be able to do some of those things. So they take the initiative for that. The others who can contribute in terms of doing some other kind of an activity which will enhance the performance will have to perform that role. And together as a team, by creating synergy and through a teamwork, which requires very good communication skills to interact with each other, to synergize with each other, and also uh, the team player abilities, to be able to work as a team. That is what we mean by collaboration. And through that collaborative approach, if it is performed as a team, then it will absolutely result in a better performance. And today, in most of the organizations where we work, the kind of job which we do, it is highly demanded that we work as a team, and teamwork will demand both abilities, technical as well as behavioral, to create results. Because ultimately, the objective is to create results, and that is what you mean by performance. And that can only be counted as performance when you are able to bring the results. So, therefore, we say that again, going back to that important definition of competency, it involves two types of competencies, technical as well as behavioral, and the two competencies will have to be blended. And when you blend that, it creates that kind of result oriented performance which can be counted as performance. So the objective is to achieve the performance using the competencies, which would be a combination of technical as well as behavioral. Now, going forward, we would like to look at the definition or the description of competency. Now, behavioral scientists and HR practitioners have listed out expected competencies for different accomplishments. Probably it could be a different set of competencies for an activity like financial services, or it could be something slightly different for a manufacturing activity. However, as a general prescription or as a generic approach, we could talk of different competencies like this description, which are required, or elements of the competency, one of which is the drive, which is the motivation to pursue a goal. Now, unless we have the drive to pursue a goal, we'll be just beating around the bush and we will not have any result oriented performance. Because as we have already seen, end of the day, what matters is what results we bring out using our competency. The other important thing is, because we work in an environment in which we have to have collaboration and we have to create synergy amongst the team members, the power to influence for effective negotiation, so that somebody provides the leadership initiative to ensure that whatever efforts are being put in will bring the results. That person should have the power to influence for effective negotiation. Because sometimes some of the members in the team may not be going in the expected direction, and the other members who have that leadership initiative uh, will have the powers to influence for effective negotiation, so that all of us work towards a common goal and the performance. So that also becomes part of the description of the competency. Knowing the rules of the game to play a game and win a game professionally. So you see, it's just like playing any professional game like football or cricket. So in fact, Albert Einstein had once said that if you want to play a game and win the game, the most important requirement is you should know the rules of the game. And that is very true in any professional game. So we should know the rules of the game so that you will follow the rules and you will be able to achieve the results. So knowing the rules to play a game and win a game professionally is an important description of a competency. And in fact, when Albert Einstein was once asked in another situation as to how do you win the game in a competitive environment, he had only to say that Knowing the rules better than the competition is very essential to outbeat competition. So it all narrows down to knowing the rules of the game, the basics. And then using that knowledge, you play the game with the spirit of winning. Now, the steps involved in competency description would include number one, the job description. And the job description can be done through a systematic job analysis. So we say competency description can be done by job analysis, which is nothing but job description. We'll have to understand the various steps involved, the processes to be followed, and what kind of activity has to be performed. So this is what I mean by the job description. Going forward, assessment of competencies, what are the behavioral indicators? So we have already seen that competency description is equal to definition of the competency plus behavioral indicators. For example, now when we talk about behavioral indicators, customer centricity as a competency should have ownership as a behavioral indicator. We know that customer centricity is very important to actually give the best customer experience, and through that, the business development. Now, how do you look at that behavioral indicator for customer centricity as a competency or an attribute? So attribute is also known as competency. So to have customer centricity as a competency or as an attribute, one should have ownership as a behavioral indicator. So there are talent who will take ownership and then perform their role. Now, if you perform a role without taking ownership, you're just joining the bandwagon. But to create a result-oriented approach, one has to take ownership, and that ownership taking is actually explained as a behavioral indicator, because some will do it, some others will not do it or may not do it. But one who does it, we say that that person has got a behavioral indicator which is known as taking ownership. And that taking ownership as a behavioral indicator is very essential in an attribute like or in a competency like customer centricity. Another example would be adaptability as a competency. Should have among many indicators the following behavioral indicators. Now we say that to survive in today's changing world and changing environment and market dynamics, you have to be adaptable. So how do you look at that competency? What are the behavioral indicators which will show or prove that there is this competency of adaptability? So some of the behavioral indicators would be that such a person will be able to adapt to changes quickly and easily. So being able to quickly adapt to the changes quickly and easily is a behavioral indicator of adaptability. The next behavioral indicator, which we can look at as an example for adaptability, is that showing willingness to learn new methods. Now, there are some of us who will probably not show that willingness to learn new methods, but there would be others who would come forward, take initiative to learn new methods. So, showing that behavioral indicator of willingness to learn new methods is a very important indicator of adaptability, because one who does that proactively and willingly will be able to quickly adapt to the new situation as compared to somebody who does not show the willingness. Another very important requirement in the dynamics of adapting is that shifting strategy in response to the demands of a situation. So it is not doing it for the sake of doing it. Now there is a demand which will require a response, that you have to shift the strategy. So we have been following one style so far. Now there is a requirement to change the style because there is a requirement of the environment, the demand of the situation. So you quickly respond to that and shift the strategy. How quickly you do it. So that is a behavioral indicator of a competency like adaptability. Now, unless we adapt to the changes, unless we adapt to the market dynamics of the environment, it is very difficult to survive or to prosper in today's environment, business environment. It is very important even in financial services that we are able to adapt to the requirements of the market and to the expectations of the customer. It may be by uh, changing the place where you do business. It could be changing the style in which you do business. It could be like using more technology so that the processes are speeded up, using other kind of tools which will help us to serve the customer better and give the customer an experience. So what is actually looked at as a behavioral indicator is how quickly we are able to change and how easily we are able to change, whether we try to resist that change to be able to change. And also we look at the willingness to learn new methods. Now, once you are willing to learn, you are able to learn. But if you are not willing to learn, even if the best of tools are given to you, you will not be able to learn those new methods. And another very important aspect from a strategy perspective is shifting the strategy in response to the demands of the situation, but not just by looking at somebody and doing it. So there is a situation in which we are working or doing our job. Now the situation has changed and the situation demands that we should change the strategy and how quickly we do that. So that is a behavior. And if you see that behavior in somebody, then we say that there is a behavioral indicator of a particular competency. It could be like customer centricity or adaptability. So I hope that that example which we have given in terms of customer centricity as well as adaptability as to what is a behavioral indicator would have helped you to understand and appreciate what is actually required of that. Now, when you look at competencies, we also look at what is known as the competency levels. We can look at some standards of measuring the levels of the competency. Now, a common competency may be required at different levels for different jobs. So depending on the level of the job, the degree of the job or the difficulty level of the job, you may have to acquire new competencies. For example, when somebody is working in a particular role and then gets elevated as a supervisor, the competency requirements also will move up or it will change. So there are different levels of competencies for different jobs or in the nature of the job. The level of competency may be at different levels depending upon the job also. For example, in banking, if you take an example, you're serving the uh, domestic customers, so you require a certain level of competency, which is again a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitude. But now, tomorrow, you start serving a customer who is living out of India. So you need to develop different levels of competency. It is the same job. We are doing service to a customer in the same financial services, but because the requirements of the job would be different, the levels of competency also will have to be different. Again, if you look at the life cycle of an employee, the levels could be at entry level, somebody who has just joined, then it would be fully effective level where somebody has already gained experience and then has to move into the next level. And then, of course, when you look at a future perspective, we also talk about the stretch or mastery level because somebody gets elevated into a senior management position or the role becomes so rich that you have to manage so many different types of activities, which we call as a stretch. So within the given time, you will have to do more than one type of job, or you have to supervise different levels of job. So for all this, you require different competencies. It could be in terms of knowledge. That depends on the levels at which performance is expected. Now, progression of competency could be at the following levels. We also talk about how the competency can progress. So it again depends on what kind of job you do, what kind of responsibilities we have. So it is behavioral scientists have classified the competency levels into four categories. The first category is known as somebody who is unconsciously incompetent. This is a very interesting part of the competency analysis or the levels. So when you say unconsciously incompetent, it would generally happen at the entry level when somebody has just joins a job or on kind of transfer or elevation is going to a different job and is basically at the entry level. Now it is said that when you do not know what you do not know, you do not know what you do not know, then you are in a level which is known as unconsciously incompetent. Now, this is actually a high risk situation because at this stage, you can commit big mistakes, you can commit a blunder, which can result in very, very bad consequences. So, uh, if you are in that state, it is always very dangerous. But generally, because all human beings have basic intelligence, common sense, when you join an organization, you have to quickly move into the second level, which is much, much better than the first level, and that is known as consciously incompetent. And this is a stage when you realize what you do not know, or you realize that I do not know this job, and which is always good because once you realize that you are not aware of how to do it or what you have to do, you will now put in efforts to understand how to do the job and what all you need to do the job. So the knowledge part and what kind of skills are required. So you start realizing that, which is always better than not knowing what you do not know. So this is second level of competency. So this will also prompt you or rather provoke you to ask questions to understand so that you will be able to job much better. And then as you learn the ropes, you will learn how to do the job. You get to have the knowledge part of it, and you also develop the skills to do it. Then you can safely move into the third stage or third level in competency, which we call as being consciously competent. So knows what one needs to know and performs as expected and meeting expectations. So as an organization, they would have told us what we are supposed to do, what kind of key result areas we have to achieve. So this is known as meeting expectations. So you are now reaching a stage when you know what you have to know, the knowledge part, and you have also developed the skills to perform the job. And as per the expected ways and lines, you are able to meet the expectations. So this stage in the competency or level in the competency is known as being consciously competent. So what happens in the life cycle is you may start with being unconsciously incompetent. Then you will quickly move into consciously incompetent, which is much better because you realize what you need to know and how to do the job. And it is always better than being unconsciously incompetent. Then as we go on, you learn the ropes very well, you get the knowledge, you develop the skills, and you're able to perform as expected or meeting the expectations. So this third level is known as being consciously competent. And then there is something beyond this, which is actually known as unconsciously competent stage or level. Now, this is also known as the mastery or expert level of performance because you start liking what you are doing. You develop a passion for the kind of performance which you need to actually bring out, and you perform this effortlessly and stylishly. It happens more out of your passion, more out of your flair, and your deep involvement in the entire exercise. And if you are able to reach the stage of being unconsciously competent in the level of competency, what actually happens is you will be able to exceed the expectations. Overachiever, you become an overachiever and you become a super performer. So it is always said that as part of competency development, we should always strive, we should always aim to reach the fourth stage, which cannot happen overnight, but you need to work towards achieving the fourth stage when you really enjoy your job and you're able to exceed the expectations And as an organizational competency level, it has always been understood that the more number of people who reach the fourth stage of being unconsciously competent or the mastery or the expert level, the organization will become a high performing organization, bringing out superior results. So that's the kind of level we need to aim at to reach the fourth stage. And I wish that all of us will work towards this. Now, the next part of the discussion is about competency mapping. So, what do we understand by competency mapping? It's what we're going to discuss. Competency mapping is the process of identifying key competencies for a particular position or a particular job. So we can list out so many competencies, which could be behavioral indicators also, but all of those competencies may not be required for each and every type of job. So in competency mapping, what we do is we list out all the competencies, expected competencies, and then we also list out what is the kind of particular position or job which we have to look at. And then we do a kind of a mapping where we try to mention that this particular job requires the following competencies. It may not be all the competencies, but some of them. So we try to prioritize and we try to prepare a list of competencies which should be required or essential for a particular position or a job. Basis the mapping, evaluation of jobs. So once you understood for this job what are the competencies, then we will be able to evaluate the job and we can do the hiring or recruitment to identify talent who will be able to meet those expectations or have those attributes or those competencies. Also, tomorrow when you do the training need analysis, again we have to understand, depending on the type of role, what are the competencies and how to help the talent to develop those competencies through various learning methods. Skill development requirements is also part of the learning and development. So all these things can be identified and we can focus and we can create interventions which will help the talent to develop those competencies so that the performance will be much better. Now, identifying required competencies for a particular job or task can help identify the right talent and further develop such talent to enhance the performance and help to identify right talent with potential. So during this exercise of mapping and actually doing the talent management part, we'll be able to also identify the potential to promote and induce better performance and provide the platform to identify talent, demonstrate the continuous improvement. So in the process of competency development, what we need to aim at is not only to imbibe those additional competencies required for playing a different and higher role, but also help the talent to do continuous improvement in performance, which will automatically require more competencies to be developed. Basis the mapping for leadership roles. Now, actually, this competency mapping can be done at different levels for entry-level employees, for different roles, again, for the middle management kind of roles. And also, we can look at mapping the competencies which are required for leadership roles. Now, the mapping for the leadership roles will help us to plan a meaningful succession planning because we can identify people who have got those competencies or who are showing behavioral indicators which will help them to play the leadership role. And we can always create a succession planning or identify the talent for the future induction as we require from time to time. So this succession planning can be formulated and implemented based on the competencies which are required. Now, competency mapping holds the key to success of the performance management in an organization. It helps to set the key result areas. We know that in performance management, one important element is the KRA formulation. So we'll have to define the KRAs for all the talent. so that they have a focus, they have a direction, and once you achieve the KRA, the organizational objectives are also taken care of. So it helps to set the key result areas that are measurable or that which could be evaluated to measure actual performance. So competency mapping helps in the performance management, particularly in framing the key result areas which the talent is expected to achieve. And through that, the actual performance can be measured, because in KRA, we set the target or indicator, and then we actually see whether the employee or the talent has achieved that result. And having achieved the result, we can also measure the actual performance. For example, some of the best practices today would be what is called a RAG analysis. So you set a target for a particular employee in terms of sales achievement or marketing performance. And it is said that if an employee continuously is able to overachieve the target, then we say that the employee as a performance is in the green, which means overachiever. Somebody who's just able to reach the target and continue in that kind of a style, we say is just in an amber, or just meeting expectation. In the case of green, it is overachieving or exceeding the expectation. Somebody who's just meeting expectation would be the next level. And then there would be also cases where somebody is not able to achieve the KRA or the expected performance, and we say that they are not able to meet the expectations. Now, depending on the level of performance and achievement expectation, we will be able to develop the competencies so that those who are not able to achieve the expected level of performance will be able to now improve their performance and either to meet the expectation or exceed the expectation. And that is all about the performance management promotion. As to competency mapping methods, the following are noteworthy. So mapping methods. So there is something called as post-performance based method that is based on the premise that the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So we can always understand or study what was the past behavior, basis which we can predict how the future is going to be. So based on the performance, the employee can be rated as outstanding, good, average, below average, etc. The idea of rating is so that we can focus on them and help them to come out of the lack of performance which would have been exhibited in the past behavior. Then there is also what is known as so there are two approaches. The other one is known as the job-focused approach, that is based on position information questionnaire and mapping each accountability or major task to the concerned job. So we'll have to have a position information questionnaire which is relating to the job and mapping each accountability or the major task to the concerned job. So we align the tasks or the accountability to the actual requirement, and we try to understand that through a questionnaire. So it's a job focused approach. So thank you for being part of this session. I hope that you have found it useful and informative, and you can always go back to the recording and revisit all these aspects and appreciate how this can help all human resources to improve the talent and to improve the competency and performance. Thank you.